Brought to you by 1AAuto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet.
Hi, I'm Don from 1A Auto. I hope this how-to video helps you out. And the next time you need a part for your vehicle, think of 1AAuto.com. Thanks.
In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the right-hand axle on this 2003 Nissan Maxima. Procedure is pretty much the same for any of this era Maxima as well as the Infiniti i30. In the video, we do use a lift, helps us get better angles as far as the camera goes. Pretty tough repair if you're doing it with jack and jack stands in your driveway, but it can be done once you know how to do it. That's half the battle. You'll need new axle from 1A Auto, jack and jack stands 12, 15, 22, and 32 millimeter sockets. 32 millimeter is something you'll probably have to buy special. Ratchet and pipe for some extra leverage. Some of these bolts, as you'll see, are very tight. 14 millimeter wrench, pry bar, hammer, catch pan, torque wrench, and some gear lube, either GL4 rated if it's a manual transmission or ATF if you have an automatic transmission. Let's start up by removing the wheel. You're going to want a 21 millimeter socket and ratchet or a breaker bar or your tire iron, and you'll probably want to start with the wheel on the ground, loosen the lug nuts, then raise and secure the vehicle with jack stands, and then remove the wheel and the tire.
Removing the cotter pin from the end of the axle.
Okay, here we use a 32 millimeter socket and an impact wrench. These bolts, the center bolts, are put on here with 217 foot-pounds of torque. So you can try a breaker bar and a pipe, but chances are on these cars you're going to need an impact wrench to get this bolt off.
So now I'm going to just make sure that there's play in this and it's pushing through the hub, no problem. If you find that it's stuck, you can just screw the nut back on a little bit, give it a couple raps and it should loosen up, no problem. I'm using the 32 millimeter impact socket and impact gun. If you don't have these air tools, you can have somebody sit in the car and apply pressure to the brake while you use the breaker bar. I'm removing the 15 millimeter nut on the lower stabilizer link. Using a breaker bar and a pipe. Get the nut free. I've broken the nut free, but I'm going to use a 14 millimeter wrench to hold the link rod. And continue.
We'll just speed up here. So just to summarize, on the one side there's the 15 millimeter nut. Don broke that free first. Then on the back side of the bracket where the stabilizer link bolts into, you can fit in a 14 millimeter wrench between the boot and the control arm and hold the stabilizer link bar or rod, and then remove the nut the rest of the way. And here Don just uses a impact wrench just to speed things up.
Removing the lower control arm, I'm going to start with the two 22 millimeter bolts at the rear. Use my pipe for extra leverage.
Okay, and we'll speed up, and you can see you need to use a ratchet and pipe or a breaker bar and pipe for some extra leverage. Those bolts are on there tight. He removes the two bolts that hold the bracket in the back, and then we move on and remove the other four bolts that hold the bar to the front of the control arm, and just using an impact wrench just to save a little time.
Axle's out. The bracket that holds the axle in place has three 12 millimeter bolts. On the bottom rear, I'm going to use just a regular wrench and work that free. The other two are located up on top and towards the engine. I'm going to use a 1-foot extension with a 12mm socket on it to get to those. I'm going to put the extension between the lower cross member and right along the axle as it's coming out of the transmission.
Okay, so speed up here again. Unfortunately, it's really hard to video. I couldn't really get the camera up in there in a way to show you those bolts, but there are 3 12mm bolts that hold the axle to the bracket, and we remove those.
We're removing the axle from the support on the engine side, and it's requiring a bit of hitting and prying to separate the two.
Okay, so we put a pry bar up in there, and there's a couple ears you can get the pry bar on. Give it some good hits with the hammer from that angle. Okay, and here we're using a hammer contacting the CV itself just to kind of get some impact on it, get it to break free, and then pulling out the pry bar again. Okay, and here just prying it right between the housing and the engine bracket, and it finally comes free. Even though I get in the picture and kind of lift it up, that really doesn't do anything. Don just gets in position and it comes right out.
Have a catch pin ready and handy, because we're going to lose a little fluid out when the seal separates. And once you've got the shaft separated, you can pull it out. Okay, I'm reinstalling the right axle shaft. We put some anti-seize lubricant on the portion where it mates up to its housing, just to make it slide in a little easier. Once you get it to the transmission, you can guide it in. And then you're going to want to line up your bolt holes from your axle shaft to the housing.
Go ahead.
With the axle in place, I'm going to put the shield back on the back side. And start with my bolts.
Okay, we'll speed up here as Don's putting those bolts back in. What he found is use a hammer, kind of press the axle into the housing and tap it with the butt end of a hammer. Helps you get the holes lined up correctly. And then put those 12mm bolts in. And yes, we're up on a lift, so it does make angles easier. This is something that you can do in your driveway, but it's going to be a little more difficult. You're definitely going to want to have a friend or a helper handing you tools and things like that, so you don't have to slide in and out. And lastly, when you put these bolts in, you want to tighten them evenly. Kind of get one snug, then make sure you get all 3 of them in first. Snug up one, snug up the other one, and then just kind of go around and tighten them so that the bracket is sucked into the housing in a uniform and even manner.
And now I'm just going to slide the spline end back into the front hub, and we put a little grease just to help get it in there smoothly. Just rotate the rotor until you get in alignment and push right through. So I'm going to put the rear end of the control arm back in.
Okay, we're going to speed it up here, put all 6 bolts in. You can try and align it as best you can back to where it was just by looking at the marks in the, in the alignment bracket. But you're definitely going to want to take your vehicle and have it aligned after this. And then you want to torque all 6 of these bolts to 120 foot-pounds. And here, just kind of fast forwarding through, we're putting that stabilizer link back on, put it back through the control arm, 15 millimeter nut, and hold the stabilizer shaft with a 14 millimeter wrench. Get that nice and tight.
Put the nut back on the axle. With a person in the car holding the brakes. Torque the hub nut to 217 foot-pounds. I'm inserting the cotter pin back in through the drive shaft, bending the gears back. I'm going to check the fluid level in the manual transmission, and we're going to locate the filler, and it's right up here. It's a 10 millimeter Allen. I'm going to use a 3/8 inch drive ratchet and break it free. And I'm using a hose to fill the transmission back up with the transmission fluid.
And obviously this fill procedure is a little different if you have an automatic transmission.
And once you see the drips coming out, you'll know that it's to the bottom of the filler plug level and it's full.
Set your torque wrench to 100 foot-pounds and tighten the lug nuts. Use a star pattern, kind of draw a star pattern as you tighten them, and then just recheck them. We hope this helps you out. Brought to you by www.oneauto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. Please feel free to call us toll-free 888-844-3393. We're the company that's here for you on the internet and in person.